Korath pressed his clawed finger against the dark patch on his neck for the third time that morning. The skin beneath his obsidian scales felt different somehow, though he could not explain how. For a warrior who had fought across 17 star systems and survived battles that would crush lesser beings, this tiny blemish seemed foolish to worry about. Yet here he was, walking through the sterile corridors of Haven 7 Medical Station, his massive frame making the hallways seem narrow. The waiting area buzzed with activity. Crystalline beings from the outer rim sat next to tentacled merchants from the trade routes. A family of blue-skinned colonists spoke in hushed tones while their children played with holographic toys. Medical stations like this one served everyone who traveled between the stars, no matter which world they called home. It was neutral ground where even enemies could seek healing without fear. When his name appeared on the display board, Korath rose to his full 8 feet and followed the directions to Examination Room 7. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Dr. Quill, the station's chief physician. The crystalline being's faceted surface caught the light as he moved, creating dancing patterns on the walls. "Korath of the Draknari 3rd Legion!" Quill's voice resonated through the translator device mounted on his chest. "What brings a veteran warrior to our medical bay?" Korath felt his pride sting slightly. Warriors were supposed to endure pain, not seek help for minor concerns. "There is a mark on my neck. It appeared 3 weeks ago and has not faded." Dr. Quill activated the room's medical scanners with a gesture. Blue light swept over Korath's massive form, penetrating scales and flesh to examine every cell. The warrior stood perfectly still, accustomed to following orders even in medical settings. Data streams flowed across the wall displays as the advanced systems analyzed his biology down to the molecular level. "Interesting," Quill murmured as the scans completed. "Your cellular activity appears completely normal. No signs of infection, parasites, or malignant growth. The area you mentioned shows standard Draknari tissue composition." Korath touched the spot again. "But it feels different. The color has changed. Battle scars often heal with slight variations in pigmentation," Quill explained, his tone suggesting the matter was settled. "Your service record indicates extensive combat experience. Such minor changes are expected. I recommend monitoring the area and returning if it grows larger or changes texture." The dismissal stung more than Korath expected. He had fought beside medics on dozens of battlefields and learned to trust their judgment, but something felt wrong about this easy answer. The spot was not like his other scars. It did not ache with old pain or pull tight when he moved. Instead, it felt almost alive in a way that made no sense. As Korath prepared to leave, the examination room door opened again. A human female entered, shorter than most species, but carrying herself with quiet confidence. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the standard medical uniform, but something about her presence made the room feel different. "Beth Rodriguez, human nurse," she introduced herself, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Korath had met humans before and knew to clasp her much smaller hand gently in his own. "Dr. Quill, I noticed the scan results from the hallway. Would you mind if I took a look?" Quill's crystalline form shifted in what Korath had learned to recognize as surprise. The quantum scanners found nothing unusual. What could physical examination reveal that our instruments missed? Beth approached Korath with calm movements that reminded him of the best field medics he had known. "Sometimes the old ways see things the new ways cannot. Would you mind sitting on the examination table?" Korath found himself complying before. He consciously decided to do so. There was something about this human's manner that inspired confidence. She did not rush to use instruments or call up data displays. Instead, she simply looked at him with focused attention. "May I see the area that concerns you?" Korath tilted his head to expose the patch on his neck. Beth leaned closer, not relying on magnification or enhanced sensors. Her eyes moved carefully across the scales, taking in details that the sophisticated scanners had dismissed as irrelevant. "When did you first notice this mark?" she asked, her voice gentle but professional. 22 days ago after returning from patrol in the void sectors." "The void sectors?" Beth's eyebrows rose. "That's deep space past the normal shipping lanes. What kind of patrol?" "Reconnaissance. We tracked pirates who had been raiding. Supply convoys. The pursuit lasted 6 days through areas where few ships travel." Beth nodded thoughtfully, then did something that surprised both Korath and Dr. Quill. She reached out and gently touched the scaled area with her bare fingertips. Her touch was light, careful, but deliberate. "Does this cause discomfort?" "No. It feels different. Not painful, but not normal." "Different how?" Korath struggled to find words for something he had never needed to describe. "Warmer, perhaps. More sensitive, as if the scales there are more aware of their surroundings." "Doctor?" Quill made a sound that his translator interpreted as skeptical. "Awareness is not a property of dermal tissue." Beth ignored the comment and continued her examination. She traced the edges of the discolored area with careful fingers, her expression growing more thoughtful. "The pattern is very regular, almost geometric. Scars from energy weapons often heal in regular patterns," Quill pointed out. "Were you injured in that area during your patrol?" Beth asked. Korath considered carefully. "No direct hits. We encountered some unusual radiation fields while tracking the pirates, but our ship's shielding protected us." "Unusual how?" "Different frequency signatures than normal space radiation. The ship's computers could not classify the exact type, but they assured us the shielding was adequate." Beth sat back on her heels, her expression intense with concentration. Around them, the medical bay's normal sounds continued. The hum of life support, the soft beeping of monitoring equipment, the distant conversation of other medical staff. But in their small examination room, silence stretched as the human nurse processed what she had learned. "Dr. Quill," Beth said finally, "I would like to request additional testing using some human medical protocols." The crystalline physician's form shifted again. "Our quantum scanners are far more advanced than human diagnostic equipment." "Perhaps," Beth agreed. "But they are designed to detect problems. Sometimes what looks like a problem is actually something else entirely." Korath found himself intrigued, despite his earlier disappointment. This human approached medicine differently than any physician he had encountered. Where others relied on instruments and data, she seemed to trust her own senses and intuition. "What kind of additional testing?" he asked. Beth looked directly into his eyes with the steady gaze of someone who had made a decision. "I think we need to find out if your body is trying to tell us something important." Beth spent the night reading through medical databases, her small quarters lit only by the glow of her datapad. While the rest of the medical station operated on reduced night shift protocols, she dove deep into human dermatology research, cross-referencing it with what little was known about Draknari biology. The pattern she had seen on Korath's neck nagged at her mind like an unsolved puzzle. By morning, she had formed a theory that would have sounded impossible to most galactic physicians. When she returned to the medical bay, she found Dr. Quill, reviewing routine patient charts with his assistant, a mantis-like being called Tick. "Dr. Quill, I need to discuss Korath's case," Beth said without preamble. The crystalline physician's faceted head turned toward her. "The Draknari warrior? Our scans were conclusive. There is no pathology present." "That's exactly the problem," Beth replied. "You're looking for disease or injury, but what if this isn't either of those things?" Tick's compound eyes focused on Beth with insectoid precision. "If not disease or injury, then what?" Beth pulled up her research on the examination room's main Display. Images of cellular structures appeared alongside data charts and theoretical models. Adaptation. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft humming of the station's environmental systems. Dr. Quill's crystalline form remained perfectly still, which Beth had learned meant he was either deep in thought or profoundly skeptical. Adaptation occurs over generations, Quill said finally. Evolution does not happen to individuals within their lifetime. Not evolution, Beth corrected. Adaptation. On Earth, we have documented cases of rapid cellular adaptation in response to extreme environments. Certain bacteria can alter their metabolism in days. Some fish can change their physiology within weeks when moved between salt and fresh water. Even human cells can adapt to radiation exposure faster than we once thought possible. Tick's translator produced a sound like grinding metal. Drachnari are not bacteria or fish. No, but they are carbon-based life forms with cellular repair mechanisms, Beth countered. Korath mentioned unusual radiation in the void sectors. What if his body detected a threat and began adapting to protect itself? Dr. Quill's form shifted slightly. The quantum scanners detected no radiation damage. Because there isn't any, Beth said with growing excitement. The adaptation worked. His cells changed before damage could occur. When Korath arrived for his follow-up appointment, he found the examination room filled with tension. Dr. Quill stood near the scanning equipment while Beth waited by the examination table. Both physicians looked at him with the intensity of hunters studying prey. Korath, Beth began, I want to try some different tests. Human diagnostic methods that focus on cellular activity rather than damage detection. The warrior settled onto the examination table, which creaked under his weight. What do these tests involve? Beth activated a device that looked primitive, compared to the room's gleaming quantum scanners. This measures cellular metabolism and activity rates. On Earth, we learned that rapid adaptation shows specific patterns in how cells consume energy and process materials. And you believe I am experiencing this adaptation? Korath asked. I think your body encountered a threat it had never faced before and found a way to protect you, Beth explained. The spot on your neck isn't damage or disease. It's your first line of defense against void sector radiation. Dr. Quill's skepticism was visible in the way his crystalline facets caught the light. Show us this evidence. Beth began her examination, using instruments that seemed almost archaic by galactic standards. She took tissue samples using a simple biopsy tool, then prepared them for analysis using techniques developed centuries ago on Earth. While quantum scanners could examine matter at the subatomic level, Beth's equipment looked at broader patterns of cellular behavior. The first results appeared on her display after an hour of careful work. Korath's scales from the marked area showed elevated metabolic activity, increased production of protective proteins, and a cellular structure slightly different from samples taken from unmarked areas of his skin. Fascinating, Tick admitted, grudgingly. The cells are indeed behaving differently. More than differently, Beth said, her voice rising with excitement. Look at these protein chains. They're specifically designed to absorb and neutralize the type of radiation found in deep space voids. Dr. Quill moved closer to examine the data. This should not be possible. Cellular adaptation cannot occur this rapidly. Not according to galactic medical theory, Beth agreed. But human medicine learned long ago that life finds ways to survive that theory cannot always explain. She pulled up comparative images showing the cellular structure of Earth organisms that had adapted to extreme environments. Deep-sea bacteria that learned to process toxic chemicals, plants that developed radiation resistance after nuclear accidents, even human cells that adapted to high-altitude living within single generations. Korath watched the discussion with growing amazement. These tiny humans, considered primitive by most galactic standards, understood something about biology that advanced species had missed. If this adaptation is beneficial, he said slowly, then I am becoming better suited to operate in the void sectors. Exactly, Beth confirmed. Your body recognized a threat and began modifying itself to handle it. What we thought was a medical problem is actually a biological solution. Dr. Quill's form remained still for long moments. If your theory is correct, this represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how adaptation works. Or it represents a fundamental misunderstanding of how sophisticated our diagnostic equipment should be, Beth replied. Sometimes looking too hard for complex problems makes you miss simple solutions. The examination room fell quiet as all three beings contemplated the implications. If Beth was right, it meant that Korath was not just healing from exposure to strange radiation. He was becoming immune to it. More troubling for the galactic medical community, it meant their advanced technology was blind to beneficial changes, only capable of detecting problems. Tick broke the silence. How do we verify this theory? Beth smiled for the first time since beginning her research. We do what humans have always done when faced with the unknown. We test it. Over the following days, Beth designed a series of experiments that combined human observational methods with careful analysis of Korath's changing physiology. She documented the progression of his adaptation, measured the increasing resistance of his modified scales, and tracked the spread of protective changes to other areas of his body. Most importantly, she did something that the station's sophisticated medical systems had never been programmed to do. She looked for beneficial changes instead of problems to fix. The results astonished everyone involved. Korath's body was not just adapting, it was actively improving itself to handle environmental challenges that would be lethal to unmodified members of his species. The spot on his neck was just the beginning of a transformation that would make him uniquely suited to survive in the galaxy's most dangerous regions. Word of Beth's discovery began to spread beyond the medical bay. Other physicians requested copies of her data. Medical researchers from across the system sent inquiries about her methods. Within days, the small human nurse had become the center of attention from beings who had previously considered her species too primitive to contribute meaningfully to galactic medicine. But Beth was too focused on her work to notice the growing interest. She had proven that human medical intuition could reveal truths that advanced alien technology missed. Now she faced an even bigger challenge, convincing the galactic medical community to change everything they thought they knew about. Adaptation and healing. 3 weeks after Beth began her unconventional testing, Korath returned to the examination room with news that changed everything. The veteran warrior moved differently now, with a confidence that seemed to radiate from within. The dark patch on his neck had expanded, forming an intricate pattern that resembled scales within scales. The changes are accelerating, Korath reported as he settled onto the reinforced examination table. Areas of my body that were never exposed to the void sector radiation are beginning to show similar modifications. Beth documented the spread with careful photography and measurements. The adapted scales now covered nearly a quarter of Korath's neck and were beginning to appear on his arms and chest. Under her specialized lighting, they gleamed with an otherworldly sheen that suggested they were more than just cosmetic changes. How do you feel? She asked, running her now familiar gentle examination. Stronger, more aware of electromagnetic fields around me. Yesterday, I detected a small radiation leak in the station's waste processing system before the sensors registered. Dr. Quill, who had become a reluctant convert to Beth's methods, leaned forward with interest. You sensed radiation directly? Through my modified scales. They feel warm when exposed to certain energy frequencies, cold when the environment is completely clean. Korath paused thoughtfully. It is like gaining a new sense. Beth's tests confirmed what Korath described. His adapted tissue showed response patterns to radiation that were unlike anything in the galactic medical databases. The scales were not just protecting him, they were turning him into a living detector for dangerous energy sources. When the results appeared on the display screen, even Tick's usually skeptical demeanor shifted to amazement. The cellular analysis showed protein structures that seemed designed by an engineer rather than grown by biology. The modified scales absorbed harmful radiation and converted it into harmless heat, while simultaneously providing sensory feedback about the energy environment around them. This defies every principle of evolutionary biology we understand, Dr. Quill admitted. Beneficial adaptation cannot occur this rapidly or this precisely. Unless, Beth said quietly, we have been wrong about how adaptation works. She pulled up her latest research, which had expanded far beyond Korath's individual case. Human databases contained hundreds of documented instances of rapid adaptation in extreme environments. Marine life adapting to pollution within decades, bacteria developing new metabolic pathways in response to changing chemistry, even human populations showing genetic changes within generations when exposed to new diseases or environmental pressures. Human medicine has always acknowledged that life adapts faster than theory predicts, Beth explained. We learn to work with adaptation rather than against it. Galactic medicine seems focused on maintaining biological status quo rather than recognizing beneficial change. Dr. Quill's crystalline form reflected the examination room lights as he processed this concept. You suggest our entire medical philosophy is flawed? Not flawed, Beth corrected. Incomplete. Your quantum scanners are incredibly sophisticated at detecting problems, but they interpret any deviation from baseline as pathology. They cannot recognize beneficial mutations because they are programmed to see all change as damage. To demonstrate her point, Beth ran Korath through both human and galactic diagnostic protocols. The quantum scanners still reported abnormal cellular activity and recommended treatment to return his biology to baseline Draknari standards. Her human equipment, meanwhile, showed a healthy organism adapting successfully to environmental challenges. The technology is not the problem, Beth continued. The interpretation is. Galactic medicine treats biological change as something to prevent or cure. Human medicine learned to ask whether change might be beneficial before deciding to stop it. Korath listened to this discussion with growing fascination. You mean other species might be capable of similar adaptation, but their medical systems prevent it from occurring? Or fail to recognize it when it does occur? Beth confirmed. How many beings have been treated for mysterious conditions that were actually beneficial adaptations? The implications sent ripples of concern through the medical bay. If Beth was correct, the galactic medical establishment had been suppressing beneficial evolution for centuries without realizing it. Countless individuals might have been cured of adaptations that would have made them stronger, healthier, or more capable. Dr. Quill spent hours reviewing historical medical records with this new perspective. Case after case showed patterns that had been interpreted as disease or malfunction, but which could now be understood as adaptive responses to environmental pressures. Miners developing unusual lung modifications that increased oxygen efficiency. Deep space crews showing cardiovascular changes that improve circulation in low gravity. Colony populations developing digestive modifications that allowed them to process local food sources more effectively. We have been preventing our own species from evolving, he concluded, with something approaching horror in his translated voice. Beth nodded grimly. And missing the signs when evolution succeeded despite medical intervention. Word of their discoveries could not be contained within Haven 7 Medical Station. Research requests flooded in from medical facilities across the galaxy. Xenobiologists demanded access to Korath for study. The Galactic Medical Consortium dispatched investigators to verify the claims being made about human diagnostic methods. The station's quiet medical bay transformed into a hub of intense scientific activity. Representatives from dozens of species arrived to observe Beth's techniques and examine Korath's continuing transformation. The Draknari warrior, who had sought treatment for what he thought was a minor blemish, found himself at the center of a medical revolution. Throughout the chaos, Beth maintained her careful documentation of Korath's progress. The adapted scales continued spreading across his body in precise patterns. His new sensory abilities grew more refined, allowing him to detect and analyze different types of radiation with increasing precision. Most remarkably, his body began showing preemptive adaptations to environmental challenges he had not yet encountered, as if his biology was learning to anticipate threats. "Your immune system has become predictive," Beth explained during one examination. "It is not just responding to current threats, but preparing for potential future ones based on the patterns it has learned." Korath flexed his newly adapted arm, watching the scales shift color slightly in response to the room's artificial lighting. "I feel as though I am becoming something new. Not just Draknari, but something more." "You are," Beth confirmed. "You are becoming the first of your kind to consciously participate in beneficial adaptation. Instead of fighting biological change, you are embracing it." As news of their work spread beyond medical circles, it sparked debates that reached the highest levels of galactic government. If species could adapt rapidly to new environments, it changed everything about colonization, space exploration, and the fundamental understanding of biological limits. But for Beth, the most important discovery was simpler. Sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy could not replace careful observation, patient listening, and the willingness to consider that nature might be smarter than science. Human medicine's greatest strength was not its instruments or techniques, but its recognition that life finds ways to thrive that no theory can fully predict or control. The veteran warrior who had worried about a simple spot on his neck had become living proof that evolution was not a slow, distant process, but a continuous conversation between life and environment. And sometimes, all it took was a human nurse willing to listen to what that conversation was really saying. The first delegation from the Galactic Medical Consortium arrived on a research vessel that dwarfed Haven 7 Medical Station. Director Voss, a tall humanoid with silver skin and multiple arms, swept into the medical bay with an entourage of specialists, representing 12 different species. Their arrival transformed the quiet station into something resembling a diplomatic summit. Beth found herself facing a room full of beings whose medical knowledge spanned thousands of years and dozens of worlds. They had come to debunk what they considered impossible claims made by a primitive human nurse about evolutionary biology. The weight of their combined skepticism was almost tangible. "Nurse Rodriguez," Director Voss began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, "we have reviewed your reports regarding the Draknari subject. While interesting, they contradict fundamental principles of biological science." "Which principles?" Beth asked calmly, having expected this confrontation. "Beneficial adaptation cannot occur within an individual lifetime," stated Dr. Quiche, a octopus-like being whose tentacles writhed with apparent agitation. "Evolution requires generational selection pressure over extended time periods." Beth gestured to Korath, who stood nearby. The warrior's transformation had continued during the weeks since her discovery, and now nearly half his body showed the adapted scales. Under the examination room's lights, he looked like a living artwork of biological engineering. "Then how do you explain what you see?" Beth asked. Dr. Quiche extended several tentacles toward Korath, running advanced scanners over the adapted areas. The readings appeared on multiple displays around the room, showing cellular structures that defied conventional understanding. "Artificial modification," suggested Dr. Neem, a crystalline being similar to Quill. "Some form of technological enhancement designed to mimic biological adaptation." Korath spoke for the first time since the delegation arrived. "I have undergone no technological procedures. The changes began after my patrol in the void sectors and have continued under observation by multiple medical staff." "Contamination, then," Director Voss declared. "Exposure to unknown organisms that are modifying your biology." Beth had anticipated this argument as well. She presented her comprehensive analysis of Korath's blood, tissue, and cellular samples. No foreign organisms detected, no artificial materials or technological implants. The modifications are arising from his own genetic expression, triggered by environmental exposure. Impossible, Dr. Quiche repeated firmly. Why? Beth asked. Because your medical theory says it cannot happen, or because your instruments cannot. Detect how it happens? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Director Voss's silver skin shifted slightly in what Beth had learned to recognize as a sign of irritation. Our medical understanding is based on millions of years of accumulated knowledge from hundreds of species, he said. Human medicine is barely a few thousand years old. And in those few thousand years, Beth replied, human medicine learned something that millions of years of galactic knowledge apparently missed. Life adapts faster and more creatively than theory predicts. To prove her point, Beth presented case studies from her expanded research. Working with Dr. Quill and Tick, she had identified 17 other patients in the station's recent records who showed signs of beneficial adaptation that had been misdiagnosed as medical problems. A Zephyrian trader whose lung capacity had increased after years of breathing recycled ship air. A Martok engineer whose eyes had developed enhanced sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. A colony administrator whose digestive system had modified itself to process nutrients from local plants more efficiently. In every case, Beth explained, the individual sought medical treatment because they felt different. In every case, our standard protocols recommended returning their biology to baseline normal. We were curing people of beneficial adaptations. Dr. Quill, who had become Beth's strongest supporter among the galactic medical community, added his analysis. When we stopped treating these modifications as pathology and began studying them as beneficial adaptations, the results were remarkable. Enhanced performance, improved health, better environmental tolerance. The visiting specialists spent 3 days conducting their own examinations of Korath and the other adaptive cases. Their sophisticated instruments confirmed what Beth's simpler equipment had detected, but they struggled to accept the implications of their findings. Even if we accept that rapid beneficial adaptation can occur, Dr. Nemes said during one heated discussion, it fundamentally challenges our approach to medicine. If biological change can be beneficial, how do we determine what to treat and what to encourage? The same way human medicine has always worked, Beth replied. By observing the patient, understanding their environment, and asking whether the changes help or harm them. Director Voss reviewed the growing body of evidence with obvious reluctance. If your theory is correct, it suggests that our medical intervention has been preventing natural adaptation across the galaxy. Not preventing, Beth corrected. Failing to recognize. The adaptation happens regardless. We have been treating the symptoms without understanding what they represent. The breakthrough came when Dr. Quiche discovered evidence of adaptive responses in his own species' medical history. Records from the early colonization period showed unusual physiological modifications among deep-sea settlers that had been systematically treated as medical disorders. When the treatment stopped, the modifications stabilized into permanent beneficial adaptations that allowed underwater habitation. We eliminated our own evolutionary advantages, he realized, with something approaching horror. Generations of potential adaptation lost because we categorized all change as disease. The revelation sparked intense debates within the delegation. If beneficial adaptation was real and widespread, it meant reconsidering centuries of medical practice. It also raised uncomfortable questions about how many individuals had been denied the opportunity to become better suited to their chosen environments. Korath, meanwhile, had become something unprecedented in galactic history. His continued adaptation had made him capable of detecting and analyzing radiation patterns that no instrument could match. More remarkably, his body was beginning to show preparations for environmental challenges he had not yet encountered, as if his biology was learning to anticipate future needs. He has become a living laboratory for beneficial evolution, Beth explained to the assembled specialists. His body is not just adapting to current challenges, but developing general improvements in environmental tolerance. When the delegation finally departed, they carried with them data that would reshape galactic medicine. But they also carried something more important: the recognition that a human nurse's willingness to question established theory had revealed a fundamental truth about life itself. Director Voss's final words to Beth were both admission and warning. "Your discoveries will change everything we thought we knew about biology and medicine. The implications reach far beyond this station or even this system." Beth watched their research vessel disappear into hyperspace, knowing that word of their work would spread throughout the galaxy. Medical schools would need to revise their curricula. Diagnostic equipment would need to be reprogrammed. Most importantly, physicians would need to learn to recognize beneficial change instead of automatically treating all deviation as pathology. But her focus remained on the patients under her care. Korath and the others who had undergone beneficial adaptation needed ongoing monitoring and support. They were pioneers of conscious evolution, and their well-being mattered more than any theoretical implications their existence might create. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most profound discoveries came not from the most advanced technology or the oldest wisdom, but from a simple willingness to observe carefully, listen patiently, and consider that nature might be smarter than any theory designed to explain it. 8 months had passed since Korath first noticed the spot on his neck. Now he stood in the newly constructed Adaptive Medicine Research Center, built as an extension to Haven 7 Medical Station, watching Beth train the first class of Galactic physicians in human diagnostic methods. The transformation was remarkable in both of them. Korath's adaptation had stabilized into something that defied every previous understanding of Draknari biology. His scales shimmered with patterns that changed in response to different types of radiation, making him a living sensor more sensitive than any technological device. More importantly, his success had inspired others across the galaxy to embrace rather than fear beneficial biological changes. Beth had been promoted to Director of Adaptive Medicine for the Galactic Medical Consortium, a position created specifically to study and nurture beneficial evolutionary responses. Her small laboratory had grown into a research facility that attracted students and patients from hundreds of worlds. The key principle, Beth explained to her mixed-species audience, is to observe first and theorize second. Our instruments are tools to support observation, not replace it. In the front row, a young Zephyrian physician raised a wing hand. But how do we distinguish between beneficial adaptation and harmful mutation? By asking the right questions, Beth replied. Does the change improve the individual's ability to function in their environment? Does it solve a biological challenge they face? Does it cause harm or distress? She gestured to Korath, who had become her primary demonstration subject. When Korath first came to us, he was concerned about a cosmetic change. Our quantum scanners found no pathology and recommended monitoring, but observation revealed something the scanners missed: purposeful biological improvement. Dr. Quill, now Beth's primary research partner, added his perspective. Human medicine taught us that biology is creative in ways our theories cannot predict. Sometimes the most sophisticated analysis misses simple truths. The research center had documented over 300 cases of beneficial adaptation in the past 8 months. Colony populations developing improved digestive systems for local foods. Miners gaining enhanced lung capacity for thin atmospheres. Deep space crews showing cardiovascular improvements for extended low-gravity exposure. Each case followed the same pattern: initial concern about biological changes, followed by recognition that the changes were beneficial adaptations to environmental challenges. Most significantly, they had discovered that beneficial adaptation could be encouraged and guided rather than simply observed. By providing the right environmental conditions and medical support, individuals could develop specific adaptive responses to anticipated challenges. The process was being called conscious evolution, the deliberate cooperation between individual choice and biological adaptation. A delegation from Earth had arrived the previous week, led by Dr. Emma Walsh from the Terrestrial Medical Academy. The reunion between human medical professionals had been emotional for Beth, who had spent 3 years as the only human on the station. "What you have accomplished here changes everything," Dr. Walsh had told her. "Earth medical schools are restructuring their entire approach based on your reports. We are calling it the Rodriguez paradigm." Beth had felt both pride and embarrassment at having her name attached to what she considered a simple return to observational medicine. But she understood the significance of what had happened. By trusting human instincts and methods in an alien medical environment, she had revealed fundamental truths about adaptation that had been hidden by over-reliance on technology. The impact extended far beyond medicine. Colonial expansion programs were being redesigned to work with biological adaptation rather than against it. Space exploration missions now included adaptation specialists to help crew members develop beneficial responses to new environments. Even terraforming projects were being reconsidered, with greater emphasis on helping colonists adapt to worlds rather than forcing worlds to support unchanged humans. Korath had become something of a celebrity, traveling to medical conferences across the galaxy to demonstrate the reality of rapid beneficial adaptation. But he always returned to Haven 7, which had become his home base for ongoing research and development of his unique abilities. "I am no longer simply Draknari," he had told Beth during their most recent examination. "I have become something new, something better suited to the galaxy we actually live in, rather than the worlds our species evolved on." His scales now covered most of his body in intricate patterns that responded to different environmental conditions. He could detect radiation, electromagnetic fields, gravitational anomalies, and even subtle changes in atmospheric composition. More remarkably, his body continued developing new sensory capabilities as he encountered different environments. "You have become the first example of directed evolution," Beth had replied. "Your body is not just adapting to current challenges, but preparing for future ones based on learned patterns." The research center's success had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. Plans were underway to establish similar facilities throughout inhabited space, with human medical professionals serving as consultants to help. Other species recognize and nurture their own adaptive capabilities. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. Galactic medicine had shifted from a focus on maintaining biological status quo to recognizing and supporting beneficial change. Medical students now learned to ask whether a biological modification might be an improvement rather than automatically categorizing it as pathology. The transformation was not without controversy. Traditional medical practitioners argued that encouraging biological change was dangerous and unpredictable. Some species governments worried about the implications of conscious evolution for social stability. Religious groups debated whether directed adaptation was natural or represented dangerous interference with divine design. Beth addressed these concerns during her presentations to the Galactic Medical Council. "We are not creating artificial changes," she explained. "We are recognizing and supporting natural processes that have always existed. The difference is that we now work with adaptation instead of against it." The evidence supported her position. Individuals who underwent conscious adaptation showed better health outcomes, improved environmental tolerance, and enhanced quality of life. More importantly, the adaptations were stable and beneficial, showing none of the negative effects that critics had predicted. Korath's latest development had been the most dramatic proof of adaptation's potential. During a recent expedition to survey a newly discovered world, his body had spontaneously developed tolerance for the planet's unusual atmospheric composition. Within days of arrival, his respiratory system had modified itself to process the alien gases efficiently, allowing him to work on the surface without life support equipment. His biology has learned to learn, Beth reported to the assembled medical professionals. Each successful adaptation makes the next one easier and faster. He is becoming a universal biological interface with any environment. The implications reached beyond individual health. If conscious adaptation could be reliably achieved, it opened possibilities for exploring previously uninhabitable worlds, working in dangerous environments, and expanding the boundaries of where life could thrive. As Beth concluded her presentation to the mixed species audience, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A veteran warrior's concern about a spot on his neck had revealed fundamental truths about life, adaptation, and the relationship between observation and understanding. The most important lesson, she told her students, is that life is smarter than we are. Our job as medical professionals is not to control biology, but to understand and support it. Sometimes the most advanced technology in the galaxy cannot replace careful observation and willingness to consider that nature might have better solutions than we do. Dr. Quill, whose crystalline form now bore small modifications that helped him interface more effectively with human medical equipment, added his thoughts. Nurse Rodriguez taught us that expertise comes not from the sophistication of our instruments, but from the wisdom to use them appropriately. Human medicine's greatest strength is its recognition that each patient is unique and that beneficial change should be celebrated rather than corrected. After the presentation, Beth found herself alone with Korath in the observation deck of the research center. Through the transparent walls, they could see ships arriving from across the galaxy, bringing new patients and students to learn about adaptive medicine. "Do you ever regret seeking treatment for that spot?" Beth asked. Korath's adapted scales shifted color slightly, a sign that he was processing electromagnetic signals from the station's communication array. "Never. That spot was my body's way of asking for help to become something better. You were the first person to listen to what it was really saying. And now I am becoming something that can survive and thrive anywhere in the galaxy. More than that, I am proof that evolution is not something that happened to our ancestors, but something that continues in each of us every day." Beth nodded, watching a transport arrive carrying patients from 3 different star systems. Each would undergo evaluation to determine whether their biological changes represented beneficial adaptations that should be encouraged rather than corrected. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most profound discoveries came not from the most advanced civilizations or the oldest wisdom, but from a willingness to observe carefully, listen patiently, and trust that life finds ways to thrive that no theory can fully predict or control. In the end, it had taken a human nurse's simple approach to medicine, treating each patient as an individual worthy of careful attention, to reveal truths that had been hidden by over-reliance on sophisticated technology. The veteran dragon had thought it was just a spot, but what the human nurse discovered had amazed everyone and changed the course of galactic medicine forever. As ships continued arriving with new patients seeking adaptive medicine, Beth knew that this was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, individuals were learning to embrace beneficial change rather than fear it. They were becoming active participants in their own evolution, guided by medical professionals who had learned to recognize improvement when they saw it. The future belonged to those willing to adapt, and for the first time in galactic history, they had the medical support to do so safely and effectively. Humanity's gift to the galaxy was not advanced technology or superior firepower, but something simpler and more powerful, the wisdom to work with life rather than against it.